everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about All Elite Wrestling. Dynamite, of course, because this week was a pretty big week on paper. We had Jungle Boy taking on Chris Jericho in that 10-minute challenge. We had a tag title match. It looked like everything was kind of building towards this, the final AEW show of 2019. But did it live up to expectations? Let's find out by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time for AEW Graded. We kick things off with hot tag team action as Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page take on the Lucha Bros, Pentagon and Rey Fenix. No entrances, no messing around, no time for any of that nonsense. And the reason for that is that they go almost 20 minutes and it's really fast paced. Omega and Phoenix over the past year or so have just built this incredible chemistry between the pair of them thanks to their excellent singles series of matches, but now in tag team action that chemistry is still very much evident, and also that's not to say that Hangman and Pentagon weren't doing their bit either. They were totally going for it, all four men going hell for leather in front of a really hot crowd in Corpus Christi, Texas. Not historically one of the more vocal wrestling crowds in the United States, but I think they try to prove a lot of people wrong here, and fair play to you guys at Corpus Christi, fair play. At one stage we get a bit of spooky subliminal advertising as Evil Uno just pops up on the screen for a second and then fades away again, but clearly quickly enough for you to see that it's Evil Uno of the Dark Order. But commentary don't know. They obviously view things at a slower frame rate than we do because they were like, what was that? I don't know. I guess we'll just carry on calling the match, guys. Come on. Yes, this would prove to be a pretty big night for the Dark Order, and if you don't like the sound of that, then no. Well, don't join them, I guess. I mean, at least they gave us a choice. Towards the end of the match, the babyfaces are in control, but Hangman Page misses with the buckshot lariat, or more accurately, Pentagon ducks out of the way, and Hangman just blasts Kenny Omega, who falls down and acts like he's totally out cold. The Lucha Bros hit their double team finisher on Omega anyway to sweeten the deal, but it's all academic anyway. He sells the pinfall attempt like he's already knocked out from the lariat. Lovely stuff from Kenny. Big win for the Lucha Bros, and the whole story of Hangman's potential heel turn rumbles on. The losing pair argue in the ring after the match once Omega has recovered, and it looks like they could maybe come to blows, but then PAC appears on the Tron and calls out Kenny Omega. He says, I never got an answer. He wants another shot at Omega, basically. And he says, now it's time for me to send you a message. And he opens a locker room door, and inside is, well, I'll be honest, right? Inside is a man with his back to the camera, listening to music on his headphones. And I couldn't immediately tell who it was, but commentary could, Excalibur could. He was like, oh, it's Michael Nakazawa, Kenny Omega's best friend. And we were like, was it? Well, I was anyway. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I was shocked at how perceptive Excalibur was. PAC simply closes the door behind him, and we don't know we never find out on this episode what happens to Michael Nakazawa. Omega storms backstage, can't find him, has no idea where he is. At one point the Lucha Brothers have another crack at Omega, and that slows him down anyway. Hangman helps fight the Lucha Bros off, but yeah, Kenny just can't find Nakazawa anywhere. I guess he's been kidnapped for the festive season. Oh dear. This gets an A-. It was a quality, exciting opening tag match. Maybe the aftermath was diluted slightly by the whole PAC and Nakazawa stuff. Maybe they could have slotted that in somewhere else on this show, because really the focus should have been totally on Hangman Page's gradual descent into possible heeldom. But on the whole, a very good opening match and a good start to the show. Next up, we get Cody and Darby Allin taking on the Butcher and the Blade, with the Bunny, of course, at ringside. And usually in these sort of matches, you'd expect the smaller babyface to be the Ricky Morton, the one in trouble in the match, the one taking the beatdown from the heels and having to look to make the hot tag to his partner. But instead, it's Cody, actually, who starts out on the defensive side of things, and that makes a lot of sense because last week he lost alongside QT Marshall, and it was Darby Allin who offered him his hand in assistance. So yeah, it's Cody getting beaten up by the Butcher and the Blade for quite a while. He's bumping and selling for the newer guys, which is really nice to see, and eventually he does make the hot tag to Darby Allin, who just runs wild. He is so quick when he wants to be. Eventually though, he does get caught in a Texas Cloverleaf from the Butcher, who is like twice the size of Darby Allin, and just hoists him into it and bends him backwards. Cody then slides in to try and get him off his partner and stop him from breaking him in two, but this is a really nice little moment. Cody's like kicking away at the Butcher with his crisp, picture perfect pro wrestling little stompy kicks, and the Butcher just looks at him and doesn't move and just spits his mouth guard at him, and basically the message is, you're gonna have to do a lot better than that to get me off your partner. I am a large man. Eventually Cody becomes the legal man again, and this time he builds up a head of steam. He's now on the attack. He hits the crossroads on the Butcher, but on the outside the bunny distracts the referee from making the pinfall. The Blade tags in for the heel team and the Butcher rolls to the apron where he's just met with one of those terrifying coffin drops from Darby Allin. That takes him fully out of commission and Cody is able to pick up the win on the Blade with that new move that he's doing, that new variation of his springboard cutter, the kind of boingy up in the corner and then one more little jump and then backwards. I've described it really horribly there. It's very similar to an Os cutter, but I don't want to come across as biased in favour of Will Ospreay. Anyway, Cody was able to get the win with that manoeuvre, and this match gets a B+ from me. It wasn't as flashy or as long as the opening tag match, and therefore maybe it suffered a little bit from going on immediately after it, but it was still very enjoyable. It was a shame to see the Butcher and the Blade lose so soon, but at the same time I think it was done for the right reasons, presumably building towards another rematch between Cody and Darby, and their first bout together was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. Next up, Awesome Kong versus somebody I'm not familiar with at all, Miranda, Alize, I think is how it was pronounced. She doesn't get a lot of offense in at all, to be honest. She shows bravery, she rushes Awesome Kong, she's like, come on, let's have you. And Awesome Kong hits the back fist and then the implant buster. Is it still called that? It was called that back in Impact. Does she still call it that now? Anyway, she hits that move, covers her, 1, 2, 3. Total squash. Brandi slides in the ring and takes a section of Miranda's hair to add to her collection, which is lovely for Awesome Kong because it's really bright red hair and Kong seems to like a bit of variety on her belt of hair strands. That's pretty much it. You know, it's not the last we'll see of Brandi and the Nightmare Collective on this show, but it gets a C- from me because even though it was your pretty standard squash match and it lasted only a few seconds, the crowd just really aren't taking to this whole Brandi Rhodes stable and it's going to take a lot, I think, to get them back on side. Next up, Chris Jericho versus Jungle Boy in the 10-minute challenge, as Ross Tweddle would say, and as Chris Jericho would say, actually. Bit of a parallel there. That's right, if Jungle Boy can survive 10 minutes with Chris Jericho, then he gets the moral victory, but Jericho doesn't think that's possible at all. He's very cocky before this match, so much so that actually he brings out Sammy Guevara to kill some time, holding up cue cards, because if you're watching it on TNT, it'll go box in box and you can't hear them because the commercials are playing, and the cue cards say like, we heard you couldn't hear us during commercials. You think you're so clever, TNT? Which was, to be fair, I did like that quite a bit. The bell rings once the commercials are over, Jungle Boy comes out hot, an immediate roll-up, a pinfall attempt for a 2 count, and a big drop kick and some nice rope work and everything, and Jungle Boy's just going hell for leather, as you'd imagine. This is exactly the start of the match that this should have been. But Jericho soon takes control and hits the codebreaker with only about 2.5 minutes of the 10 expired. He refuses to make the cover because he's really cocky and arrogant. He then hits another codebreaker, 1, 2, and Jericho pulls the shoulder up. And quite often, I'm not a fan of that move in pro wrestling. I don't know if it helps either the person doing it, well, it helps the person doing it, but I worry that it buries the person being pulled up a little bit. But in this specific circumstance, I wouldn't say that it buried Jungle Boy. I'm still not a fan of that particular spot, but I don't think it did any particular harm. Jericho throws Jungle Boy to the outside of the ring where Jake Hager has a little go at him. He attacks him, and that brings, I don't know why he attacked him actually, because Jericho was really firmly in control anyway. But whatever, Jake Hager couldn't help himself, attacked Jungle Boy behind the referee's back. That brought Luchasaurus over, they started to brawl, Marco Stunt jumps off the apron, bang, knockout shot from Jake Hager, and now the referee is like, I'm gonna have to eject some people here. I think it was Aubrey, I think she ejected all 3 members of the ringside area and Marco couldn't walk, so Luchasaurus had to just scoop him up and carry him to the back. Actually, it might not have been Aubrey ref in that match, I'm really not certain. Well, it's better if, do you know what, to be fair, that means whoever was officiating this match was doing a really good job because as we all know, referees are best when you don't even realise that they're there. Jungle Boy now takes control of the match with 3 big dives in a row. The crowd are just going wild for Jungle Boy at this point. He even hits a lion salt, Chris Jericho's own move. He hits it a lot better than Jericho does these days, for a 2 count, but eventually Jericho catches him with a big powerbomb, transitioned into the walls of Jericho, and there's over a minute left to go. It's looking pretty bleak for Jungle Boy. Jungle Boy can't reach the ropes, but he manages to burn quite a lot of time attempting to reach the ropes, but his face is just contorted in agony. It's not looking like he's going to be able to do it. But he hangs on until time runs out. Jungle Boy shows himself to be a brave babyface and a potential star of the future. I think that's what they were going for here. I think that was the point. By holding on in the walls of Jericho for over a minute. The bell rings. Obviously, Jericho assumes that he's won because he's Chris Jericho, and then throws a lovely tantrum when he realizes that he hasn't. He demands 5 more minutes from Justin Roberts, and you know, Roberts isn't the timekeeper, he's just the ring announcer, but luckily the timekeeper's right next to him, and he goes, all right then, and rings the bell. Jericho runs in the ring again. Jungle Boy rolls him him up for 2, catches him again for 2 in like a crucifix pinning predicament, and Jericho's had enough by this point. He literally takes his belt, and goes home. At the top of the ramp, Jericho's interviewed by Tony Schiavone, who says, well, you were wrong, Jungle Boy lasted 10 minutes with you, and Jericho keeps on willfully misunderstanding him and saying, he didn't beat me, and Tony's like, no, he didn't beat you, but he lasted 10 minutes, and Jericho's like, no, he didn't beat me, which is peak Chris Jericho, and then he tells Tony to go away, and then basically reiterates his message to Jon Moxley to join the inner circle, and says that if he says yes, then they have a big surprise in store for him. I'm not certain what that could be. This gets a B+. It wasn't a phenomenal in-ring technical classic or anything, but it was a good match and the storytelling was very, very strong. My only issue is that quick shifting gear right at the end towards the Jon Moxley stuff. I'm worried that may have taken a little bit of shine off of Jungle Boy's performance, but still, this should help him a great deal more than it would hinder him, and I'm glad that he lasted the 10 minutes. Next up, the number 1 contenders match for Riho's Women's Championship with Kris Statlander taking on Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. And the story of this match was Baker going for that lockjaw submission attempt a lot of times, and Kris Statlander evading it through various different means, sometimes agility, sometimes strength, sometimes speed, and just managing to showcase, I guess, her all-around skill set. And again, we get more subliminal, well, not subliminal this time, just liminal, just straightforward, what's the word? Just advertising for the Dark Order in this match. We just get a bit of a hashtag at the bottom of the screen, just in big bold white letters, hashtag join Dark Order. You can't get much less subliminal than that, I suppose. I didn't feel like the two women really were on the same page for all of this match, but they certainly were when it really mattered during the finishing sequence, with Kris Statlander powering out of the lockjaw, flipping Britt Baker around in midair, catching her upside down, and then dropping her with the big bang and picking up the big victory, by the way. They've really strapped a rocket to Kris Statlander early on, and I fully agree with it. I think she's got all the potential in the world. Schiavone interviews Kris Statlander on the ramp, but he doesn't get very far because here comes Brandi Rhodes. And she has a very curious opening line to her promo. She says, Tony, you're done. Get out of here. I'm annoyed at you because the mic wasn't on. Even though she's talking into it and it's working, she's like, the mic wasn't on. Obviously, you sent it backstage with it turned off deliberately. There are several things wrong with this line, and I really didn't like it. I've got 4 points, right? First of all, why did she even say it? If she'd never pointed out that the mic wasn't turned on when she first got it, we'd never have known. Presumably she talked into it just in the back and went, 1, 2, oh, it's not on, and then turned it on and then came out and cut her promo. If she hadn't mentioned that, we'd never have known. There would never have been an issue. Secondly, how quickly was she wanting to come out? Because she interrupted pretty sharpish. Like, Kris Statlander didn't get a chance to say much. Well, she didn't say anything. She's an alien, isn't she? But she didn't get a chance to do much before Brandi came out anyway. So how quickly was she going to come out if the mic had been ready for her? Thirdly, why would Tony have sent the microphone backstage for her anyway? He may have done in real life, but in kayfabe I don't think it works, because Tony seemed surprised when Brandi came out, and then Brandi's openly telling everybody that Tony sent the mic to the back for her. Maybe I'm taking this too seriously, I don't know. And finally, why was it even relevant? Oh my god. Right, anyway, moving on from the microphone line, that really did get to me because it just felt so unfair on poor Tony. Anyway, Brandi comes down the ramp and says to Kris Statlander, have you thought more about it? Do you want to join the Nightmare Collective? And Statlander doesn't talk still because she's an alien, remember. She just sort of goes to like boop Brandi's nose, as she does in her little language of communicating, but instead wags her finger like that and says no. She turns to leave, but here are the rest of the Nightmare Collective, minus the mystery bald man, to bar her exit. Awesome Kong and Melanie Cruz. Statlander turns back around because her path is barred, and Brandi pops her in the eye with the heel of her shoe. Oh, nasty. But the crowd don't really pop for it. And I think, again, first of all, it may just be that a lot of them couldn't quite see what was going on, or didn't get that the heel of the shoe was going into Statlander's eye. But I think part of it may also just be that nobody's really enthusiastic for the Nightmare Collective and hasn't clicked with a lot of people. This gets a B-. You know, I didn't enjoy the match at first, but it really picked up in the second half, and I liked the result. I'm really enjoying this push for Kris Statlander. But the Nightmare Collective stuff really wasn't good for me, and that's why this segment only gets a B-. It dragged it down slightly. I'll go into my thoughts more on the whole Nightmare Collective thing during my overall grade segment at the end of this video, because it ties in with other parts of the show not connected to Brandi and her gang themselves. Next up, the tag title match pitting the champions SCU, Kazarian and Scorpio Sky, by the way, not Daniels, taking on the Young Bucks. Babyface versus babyface action, but I think the Bucks may have been the de facto uber baby faces here, just because they've got flappier and flashier offense. Of course I meant to say flippier. God damn it, Jack. The opening sequence here is really entertaining, with both teams just absolutely going for it, 100 miles an hour. Clearly they know each other's offense inside out, both in real life and in kayfabe too. Both teams have done their homework on each other. Nick Jackson and Scorpio Sky do an insane, like, springboard spot where Nick's on the middle rope and then Scorpio jumps up to join him, and then they're holding each other's hands. Then Nick jumps up to the top rope and then into a Hurricane Rana on Scorpio. And just the balance displayed by both men was absolutely unreal. It was maybe the most impressive thing I saw all night. The Young Bucks go on a bit of a run, but then SCU fight their way back into it, and both members of SCU actually manage to hit a cutter and turn it into a Dragon Sleeper on both of the Jacksons. But then Matt powers out of his. He is, you know, the more power-based slightly of the two Young Bucks. He powers out of his Dragon Sleeper and turns it into a suplex onto the other submission going on to basically save the day for his team. But it's not enough, because as the Bucks are setting up for the Melter Driver, SCU managed to turn the tables on them and eventually hit SCU later, their double team finisher, to retain the titles. This gets a B+ grade. It may have been a little bit shorter than you'd have thought, actually. Certainly that was my experience watching it, and the experience of the commentary team as well, who didn't seem to realize that we were going into the closing sequence when we were. I think Excalibur clicked on halfway through and was like, "Oh, here we go, see you later." And the other two were like, "Yeah, it's a great move. Oh my God, they've won." I didn't mean to say by God. It wasn't just Jim. It wasn't just Jim. That was a Freudian slip. I'm so sorry. But SCU don't have long to celebrate their victory, because here comes the Dark Order. Oh no, what have I done there? Grayson and Evil Uno are on the ramp and say they're here for an initiation ceremony. Creepers, attack. This is so cheesy, man. Creepers, attack. And all the creepers get in the ring and start beating down both babyface tag teams, the Bucks and SCU. And amongst them, or amongst all the creepers, you can see an unmasked, like a couple of unmasked men. It's Alex Reynolds and John Silver, the Beaver Boys. What were they called? The jobbers from weeks previous. The ones who last week got spoken to by Evil Uno out of their hotel television set. Everyone's just getting destroyed because the numbers game is too much. So then here comes Christopher Daniels to try and help. It doesn't work. Here comes Omega. He gets beaten down. Here comes both of the Dusts, both Gold and Stardust come down, and they get beaten down as well. It's looking very bleak for the good guys. Grayson hands a pair of masks to Reynolds and Silver. They are now official members of the Dark Order. And then Evil Uno says, "You will never doubt us again, especially not you." And they've got Matt Jackson at their feet. I don't know what he did specifically. Maybe he was really mean about them backstage or something. But I think he means, after what we do to you now, especially you will never doubt us. And then it looks like he pulls his tongue out. I don't think he does, but he does something nasty with his jaw, with his mouth. I didn't really quite catch it, but he was bleeding from it. It all looked very evil. And the Dark Order, all of them, all like 20 of them, stood tall to end the show. I'm going to give this a C grade, unfortunately. It felt really hokey, didn't it? I know that hokey is sometimes good in wrestling, but at the same time, I didn't feel like this closed the show on a good note. In fact, this may have been the worst ending to a Dynamite that we've seen since the show started. I just really didn't think it was effective in a way. And I know that the spotlight has to be shared around between, you know, you can't always end the show with Cody or Jericho or whoever's going to be challenging them next, or Moxley or whatever. You have to share it around, and sometimes the lower guys on the card do have to get a bit of the spotlight towards the end. And that's fine, but it didn't quite feel like it worked properly for me. I'll explain a bit more in my overall thoughts next. So overall, I'm going to give this show a B grade. I thought that sounds decent, doesn't it? That sounds like an alright grade, but I thought it should have been much better on paper. Coming into this week's episode of Dynamite, I thought this show was going to get a much higher grade, just looking at the card that they'd lined up. And one of the key problems, and it sounds like a very straightforward and basic problem, but it's worth talking about, and everyone is online. One of the problems is that it's very samey. There are three, again, this is a stupidly straightforward sentence, but there are three spooky groups in AEW. There's the Dark Order, there's the Nightmare Collective, and there's the Butcher and the Blade and the Bunny. And you could argue that none of them are really hitting as they should be, although fan opinion seems to have turned a little bit when it comes to the Butcher and the Blade and the Bunny. They're doing pretty well. The Dark Order were doing all right, but then this week I think might set them back a bit, and the Nightmare Collective just haven't really clicked at all, and they're all competing with each other with very similar themes, and it makes it hard for any one of those three groups to truly gain a bit of momentum and uniqueness. And also, as Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful, I think it was, on Twitter pointed out, this week's episode of Dynamite had very, very similar storylines. 3 join us storylines, pardon the expression, because Cultaholic join us. But yeah, you had 3 recruitment storylines going on in the same show, often in adjacent segments, because there was nowhere else to put them. You had the one that main event of the show and was resolved, the Dark Order, recruiting successfully John Silver and Alex Reynolds. You had the one that was rejected, Brandi Rhodes failing to get Kris Statlander into the Nightmare Collective. And also, you've got the ongoing one of Chris Jericho trying to recruit Jon Moxley into the Inner Circle. And it's just too much, and it's all going on the same show, and it's only 2 hours long. So yeah, my problem this week wasn't with the matches. I thought the action was of a generally very high standard. It was more just thematically, it's all getting a bit too samey, or at least it feels that way anyway. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.